For me, it was just getting past the fear of like feeling like I wasn't a writer. But I realized like sometimes those labels you put on yourselves, gosh, they can be so limiting.
We often hear never put an age limit on art in terms of don't worry about being too old. Does one have to worry about being too young to be a writer, filmmaker?
I mean, the joke of it, of course, is, you know, LA age, Hollywood age. So I don't mind admitting I'm 50. In Hollywood, that means I'm like 180, I think. I'm not sure. But the joke of it is, yeah, what history has shown us time and again is if someone really has a voice that they connect to and that they've developed, there's not an age limit either direction. You know, there are filmmakers who got their first real sort of break many years after they finished film school. But then we've had students here who like made feature films by the time they were like 20, you know, because they had such a passion and it never dawned on them, well, maybe I'm too young. I mean, there's a high school filmmaker who's done like 2 or 3 features, not one who went here that I've read about. And so I think like, yeah, anyone can, you know, what makes you a writer? You sit down, you write. That was the toughest thing for me because I came personally from like theater. I did theater before I went back to grad school for film school. And even though the joke of it is I always say I was like the world's worst English major because I got into college because of my math scores. And then I feel like I pulled a fast one on Penn and I said, well, I'm actually going to focus on English and communication, sorry, and spend way too much time in theaters, you know? And for me, like I always got intimidated by writing because I would read such great pieces of theater and I was like, geez, I don't think I have a Hamlet in me or Sam Shepard's work. And then I had a wonderful teacher first semester who, you know, really sort of encouraged us like, well, don't worry about climbing the mountain on that first day, like just go up a little hill. And so we would do these like short projects, short scripts, and he'd give us real specific instructions, write about a conflict, for instance. And that, for me, helped tremendously. Also, back in the day, we had this thing called video stores. You may have heard of them. And sometimes you would just walk, I would walk around Blockbuster when we had those. And you begin to see there's just a lot of stories out there. And of course, that includes documentaries. That includes animation. I mean, that shorts, features, everything. And I think for me, that helped. And I was already in my early mid-20s at that point. And one thing, you know, we have classes here for younger students. Both my sons have taken classes here. So they have it for kids and for high school age. I think they used to call them tweens, but I think that we don't use that term anymore. And one thing I would always push is like, okay, well, you're not writing 100 pages, but you are writing a 2-page story. You know, what's the beginning, middle, and end? You know, and it's incredible what these younger students could figure out and come up with in such inventive ways to work around things like not having dialogue. Do a story without them talking, but they still communicate. But they've all know about this because they all have cell phones. And so they've communicated without talking for a lot of their lives. So I think, yeah, there's not an age limit either direction because part of it is just you want to write, you know, write. That's a line from Quiz Show. You want to be a knight? You think you're a knight? Be a knight. Talking about Don Quixote. You know, so I think like that's part of it. It's just giving people an on-ramp so they can see, okay, oh, maybe I can do this. And maybe I can't write 120 pages the first time I sit down and use Final Draft software, but I probably could write 3 pages if I give myself that space and time to try it, you know. And for me, it was just getting past the fear of like feeling like I wasn't a writer. But I realized like sometimes those labels you put on yourselves, gosh, they can be so limiting, right? And conversely, sometimes you give yourself a label that you can't live up to. So I think it's just like, yeah, you feel like you're a writer, well then write. I know it sounds simplistic, but there's something to be said for just the process of what one of my colleagues used to call butt time. Sit down, type. Maybe you like standing. I don't want to talk down against those who stand while they type. It's fine. It never worked for me. But fine for you. Whatever gets you doing this or doing this. That's writing. That's being a writer.
Sure.
Hopefully someone pays you.
And there can also be pressure the other way that if you come from a group of brilliant people that you're not going to measure up.
Right.
So why even try it? Because then you might fail publicly or in front of your family or peers, whatever.
Yeah, and I think even like public speaking, right? So many people are like, it's like their biggest fear. You know, it's like you get a microphone in their hand and all of a sudden they feel like they're looking down the barrel of like a dozen guns. It's like, no, like that microphone's not going to hurt you. Yeah, your own words could hurt you. You got to be careful. But the truth is, like, you know, we all have a voice. It's just a matter of like trying, you know, and then maybe you also find out maybe writing isn't your thing, but wow, you're really good at editing. Like, oh, you really know where to put a camera. You're great with sound. I mean, that's one of the cool things that happens in film school. You know, for me, it was finding writing because I was focused so much on like directing. A lot of people are in film school. But then writing was the thing that surprised me and, you know, kind of caught me off guard. And even being an English major, it was different studying other people's work versus creating my own. And so I think like, yeah, hopefully you make it so people feel of any age, our youngest student to our oldest student feels like, yeah, you got a voice. Just explore it, you know, try.
You mentioned earlier that you have a youth program here at NYFA. Can you tell us more about that?
Am I allowed to say I'm jealous of my own kids who took these classes?
Sure.
Because, you know, I grew up in Delaware, in 1980s. Like, we didn't have film programs. Like, I couldn't just go down the street and film at Universal. I could go to, I don't know, the DuPont Experimental Station, an actual place in Delaware. But I wasn't allowed to film there, even though my dad worked there. So I think like the programs here for the younger students, we don't water it down. We don't, I always joke about, there's not directing for kids. So it's not like, okay, guys, now we're going to do a 2-shot. It's like, no, like, yes, you have to make it accessible. I'm not going to show the same clips I'll show my MFA candidates to my younger students, but a movie like Babe, I would show to any of them. If I'm showing an example of like a perfectly directed scene, I'd show that to any age. And so I think it's again, to use the word accessibility, the youth programs here are so good because we really treat the younger students just like we treat any other storytellers. You know, the expectations is that if they're here, they're interested in it, you know, and they're not at the pool necessarily, although the kids who stay over, I think, are able to go swimming and whatnot. But if they're here just for, you know, a bunch of classes, like, we're not going to water it down. We're not going to dumb it down because that's not what you can really do with creativity, you know, but we'll make it accessible. We'll say, okay, your first film is a 1-minute non-dialogue scene in continuity, real time. So what's an interesting story? If we're talking about real time, what's a moment that people don't speak and it's natural? And we'll put up a whole list on the board of that, you know? And so that then they're not trying to mime it or pantomime it, but they're really thinking of situations they're in. And then all of a sudden you have students talk about, oh yeah, this time I had to take a final and I realized I was running out of time. And half my test wasn't done. And so it's like all of a sudden talking about something incredibly relatable by everyone, including someone my age. And so then we develop that. And I think like that's what's so terrific about the younger programs here, is it gives students a real taste of storytelling and filmmaking. So that it's not just like, you know, for kids, for dummies, or it's not. It's for anyone, and you make it so it makes sense for kids of all ages. But we put the cameras in their hand pretty quickly. We sit them down and get them working, and the kids really respond to it. Both my sons had such a great time here, but I've also taught this, and some of my former students are people years later that I've seen do such amazing stuff, you know. Some of them have gone on and made feature films. One of them became an exec over at Nickelodeon and a cartoon writer. I went on a tour of Nickelodeon not long ago, and I just shot her a quick note. I'm like, hey, I'm in your building. Are you around? She came down, and hadn't seen her since I don't even know when. But she's out there doing her thing, and it started with her being a high school student here. So there's something pretty special about that.
And it dispels the myth that just because you're of a certain age, you don't have something to say.
I mean, does Billie Eilish, I mean, how many, she's got, what, 2 Oscars already, a bunch of Grammys, and there's nothing about her writing that makes her seem like she doesn't have stories to tell or things to say. You listen to her voice, and it's like, wow, like, she's done a lot of living in her living, you know? And I think, yeah, the ageism can go both directions. You know, and that all being said, I think also, though, being realistic with kids, you know, talking about the industry, and we don't get too deep into the weeds of, I don't know, a pitch when I'm talking to like a 12-year-old student, but the idea of being able to talk about your story is, my gosh, you can use that for so many things, you know, because if you can talk about your own story, then you can do a presentation in class and maybe not be so concerned or afraid. If you've directed and you've had to organize a bunch of people, well, then the next time you have a group project, how different that is. So, I mean, the learning skills, even for those who have not gone on to become filmmakers, you'll just, I don't know, it helps you grow up a lot, learn a lot in not a very long period of time. So, you know, it's a really fun program to teach. And when I can, I always try to find time to do at least one of those classes because it's just so rewarding for me. And you know, I always hope that some of the youth rubs off of me, probably not much, but their excitement about it, optimism, I think it's easy to lose those things sometimes in Hollywood.